Every trading course you've ever taken has been lying to you, not intentionally, but by omission. They taught you what to trade. Nobody taught you who you become the moment real money is on the line. That's not a small gap. That is the entire game. The chart is the easy part. You are the hard part. And the hard part is the only part that actually matters. If you've been blaming your system, your broker, your timing, I need you to sit with what I'm about to say for the next few minutes, because it might be the most important thing you hear all year. I want you to think about that for a second. Every book, every course, every webinar you've sat through at midnight with a cup of coffee, taking notes, highlighting things, feeling like this time you finally found the piece you were missing, what were they teaching you? They were teaching you patterns, they were teaching you risk to reward ratios, they were teaching you where to put your stop loss, how to read a moving average, how to identify a breakout from a range, and none of that is wrong. It's just incomplete, dangerously incomplete. Because the moment you take all of that beautiful, well-organized knowledge and sit down in front of a live chart with real money in your account, something happens that no course ever prepared you for. You change. Something inside you shifts in a way that makes everything you studied feel like it belongs to a different person, a calmer person, a person who wasn't actually at risk of anything. And that is the thing I want to talk to you about today. Not the chart, not the strategy. You, the mind that sits behind the screen. The nervous system that fires the moment a position goes red. The voice in your head that says, "Get out," 30 seconds before your stop loss is even close to being hit. That's where the real work is. That's where the real money is. And that's what this video is about. So let me be direct with you. The reason you're struggling in the early phase of trading is almost certainly not what you think it is. You probably think it's one of these things. You haven't found the right system yet. You need more screen time. You need better data. You need to study more price action. You need to find a better mentor. And maybe some of those things have a small role to play. But underneath all of them, underneath every reason you've told yourself for why it isn't working yet, there is a more fundamental issue. Your mind was not built for this. Not because it's defective, because it was built for something else. Something that, for most of human history, worked beautifully. And trading asks it to do something completely different, something it has never been asked to do before, without any preparation, without any warning, and with real money on the line from the very first trade. That's the setup. Now let me take you somewhere deeper. I want you to imagine something. Imagine that somewhere in your house, there is a thermostat on the wall. You've walked past it every day for years. You barely notice it anymore, but it's running constantly. It's monitoring the temperature. And the moment the room gets too cold or too warm, it kicks in and brings things back to the level it was set at. Now, here's the thing about that thermostat. It doesn't care if it's summer. It doesn't care if you want the room warmer today. It doesn't care about your preferences in the moment. It only knows one thing: the temperature it was programmed to maintain. And it will work against any change, whether that change is good for you or bad for you, as long as that change moves the room away from where it was set. You have one of those thermostats inside your mind. It's not regulating temperature. It's regulating psychological comfort. And specifically, it is regulating your comfort with uncertainty. That dial on your internal thermostat was set a long time ago, long before you ever opened a brokerage account. It was set by the school system you grew up in, which taught you that uncertainty meant you hadn't studied hard enough, that the right answer existed and your job was to find it. It was set by jobs and careers that rewarded certainty and punished mistakes. It was set by relationships and experiences that taught you to avoid the unknown, because the unknown was where danger lived. Your thermostat was trained over decades to equate uncertainty with threat, and to respond to threat by doing something, anything, to get back to safety. Do you see where I'm going? The market is the most uncertain environment that most people will ever voluntarily enter. There is no right answer. There is no teacher who will tell you if you got it correct. There is no performance review. There is only probability, cold, impersonal, mathematical probability playing out one trade at a time. And the moment you enter a position, your thermostat feels the temperature change. It feels the uncertainty spiking, and it does what it was built to do. It tries to bring you back to safety. Exit the trade early. Add to a losing position to bring your average down, to create the illusion of control. Check the position every 30 seconds. Move your stop loss because the price is just a little past it and it'll definitely come back. All of these behaviors, all of them are your thermostat working perfectly. They're not you being stupid. They're not you being undisciplined. They are an ancient, deeply wired system trying to protect you from something it was never designed to understand. And here's what I want you to sit with, because this matters more than any trading tip I could ever give you, that thermostat was built to protect you. It has kept you safe in enormous areas of your life. It is not your enemy. It just doesn't know how to read a candlestick chart. It doesn't know the difference between uncertainty that is dangerous and uncertainty that is profitable. It can't tell the difference between a real threat and a position that's temporarily in drawdown. To your thermostat, they feel the same. And so it responds to both of them the same way. It tries to make the feeling stop. And in the market, the fastest way to make the feeling stop is to close the trade, whether that's the right decision or not. So that's the first thing I want you to understand. The sabotage you experience in trading isn't coming from a broken place. It's coming from a very functional place that just needs new information. The thermostat can be reset, the dial can be moved, but it takes time, it takes awareness, and it takes a very specific kind of work that most traders never do, because most traders are looking at the chart when they should be looking at themselves. Let me tell you about two traders. I've worked with a lot of people over the years, and these two characters represent something I've seen play out more times than I can count. So picture them, call them whatever you want. Trader A, Trader B. Different names, different faces, but the same starting point. Same amount of capital, same strategy, same market, same charts, same conditions. Trader A sits down at his screen in the morning and he has what I can only describe as a quiet relationship with his uncertainty. He's done his prep, he knows his setup, he knows his entry criteria, his stop, his target. And when the trade is live, he watches it with something close to curiosity. Not indifference, he cares. He wants to win, but he's not fused with the outcome. If it goes against him and hits his stop, he records it. He notes what happened. He stays with the discomfort for a moment, then closes his journal and moves on. He doesn't need to know why it lost. He knows that a single trade tells him nothing about his edge. He is thinking in terms of the next 50 trades, the next 100. He knows that his edge only reveals itself across a large enough sample, and so he protects that sample by taking every valid setup, managing every trade the same way, and not letting any individual outcome mean too much. After a year of this, he's consistently profitable, not because he never loses. He loses plenty, but because the losses are absorbed, documented, and metabolized, they don't accumulate psychologically. Now, Trader B has, and I want to say this with real compassion because I've seen it in so many brilliant people, Trader B has a better strategy, more refined, more tested, more research behind it. Objectively, on paper, Trader B's edge is stronger than Trader A's. But something happens to Trader B the moment a trade moves against him. It lands differently. Each loss isn't just a loss, it's a verdict. It's the market telling him something about himself. And because each loss means something beyond its face value, Trader B can't let it sit. He has to respond to it. Sometimes that means revenge trading, jumping back in immediately to get it back. Sometimes that means the opposite, shutting down for the day, walking away, telling himself he'll figure out what went wrong before he trades again. He swings between overconfidence on winning days and self-doubt on losing days. His account goes up and down in a pattern that mirrors his emotional state rather than his edge. And here's the tragedy. Trader B knows more than Trader A. He works harder than Trader A. He studies longer, he wants it more, and he's not profitable. The difference between these two traders is not intelligence, it is not effort, it is not the quality of their strategies. The difference is what a loss means to each of them. For trader a loss is a statistical event within a probability distribution. For trader B, a loss is personal information about who he is. And that difference, that one psychological gap, is worth more than every setup, every indicator, every system in the world. I want to stay with trader B for a moment because I think he deserves that. Because if you're being honest with yourself right now, you might recognize some of him in you. And I want you to know that what's happening to him isn't weakness. It's a completely natural response to something nobody told him to prepare for. He was taught how to analyze the market. Nobody taught him that his identity would become entangled with his P and L. Nobody told him to watch out for the moment trading stops being a craft and starts being a mirror, something he holds up to himself each day to find out if he's smart enough, good enough, worthy enough. That's not trading anymore. That's something much older and much more painful. And it will bleed you dry, not just financially, but emotionally, if you don't see it for what it is. Now, I want to go even deeper, because I've given you two stories, two characters, a metaphor about a thermostat, and all of that is meant to do one thing, to make you feel seen before I ask you to think differently. So now let's think differently. Here is something that I believe, and I've believed it for a long time, that almost no one in the trading world talks about plainly. The market is not your mirror, but your mind makes it one. Let me say that again, because it's important. The market is not your mirror, but your mind makes it one. The market is generating random outcomes within the structure of your edge. That is all it is doing. It has no memory of your last trade. It doesn't know your name. It doesn't know that you had a terrible week, that you're under pressure, that you promised yourself you'd turn this around, that you can't afford another losing month. None of that information exists in the market. The market doesn't know you're there. It is a vast, impersonal river of transactions, orders, fear, greed, algorithms, and probability. And you are one very small boat on that river. It doesn't adjust for you. It doesn't care about you. And this is actually wonderful news, if you let it be. Because the moment you truly internalize that the market has no opinion about you, the moment you feel that in your body, not just think it in your head, something releases. The pressure releases. Because now the trade isn't a test. It's not an exam. It's not a judgment. It's just a probability playing out. And probabilities don't need your emotional investment to function. They need your consistent execution, and then they need you to step back and let them breathe. But here's where traders get into trouble. Because the mind is a meaning-making machine. It is extraordinarily good at finding patterns, stories, and significance in random data. That's one of the most remarkable things about human consciousness, this ability to see faces in clouds, narratives in coincidences, lessons in accidents. It's a gift. In most areas of life, it serves you well. In trading, it will destroy you if you don't manage it deliberately. Because you will look at 3 losing trades in a row and your mind will say, pattern detected, this strategy doesn't work. And it will feel like an insight. It will feel like learning, but it is not. It is the brain doing what it was built to do, finding signal and noise in an environment where 3 losses in a row is a completely expected statistical outcome for virtually any profitable trading strategy that has ever existed. You can have 20 losing trades in a row with a 60% win rate strategy, and that is well within the range of normal, well within it. The math supports it, the reality of probability supports it, but your nervous system doesn't feel math. Your nervous system feels 20 losses in a row and screams abort. And this is the gap I want you to hold in your mind as we continue. The gap between what the math says is normal and what your nervous system experiences as normal. That gap is where your money goes. Closing that gap slowly, carefully, through experience and awareness, that is what trading psychology is actually about. Not affirmations, not confidence boosting, not telling yourself you're a winner. Closing that specific, concrete, measurable gap between how probability actually behaves and how your mind interprets what it sees. Let me give you the most counterintuitive truth in all of trading. Are you ready for this? The tighter you grip, the more you lose. I'll say it differently. The more control you try to impose on an outcome that you cannot control, the worse your results will be. I know that sounds backwards. It probably sounds like I'm telling you to be sloppy or passive or not to care. That's not what I'm saying. Let me be precise. There are two kinds of control in trading. There is the control you have over your process, your preparation, your criteria, your entry, your position size, your stop placement. All of that is controllable and you should control it rigorously. And then there is the control you try to exert over the outcome, whether this specific trade wins or loses. That second kind of control is an illusion. It does not exist. The outcome of any individual trade is not yours to determine. It was determined by the collective action of every market participant before you even clicked buy. You cannot change it. You cannot wish it into being different. You cannot stare at the chart hard enough to make the price go where you want it to go. But here's what's fascinating, and this took me a long time to fully appreciate. When traders try to control outcomes, they actually make their results worse than if they had done nothing at all. Because the attempt to control the uncontrollable always manifests as interference with the process. Moving a stop loss, exiting early because it feels like it's going to reverse, adding to a losing position to bring the average down. All of these are attempts to control an outcome, and they all, on average, reduce your edge. The data is clear on this. The traders who intervene least in their trades, who set them up correctly, and then let the process run, outperform the traders who actively manage every position in response to moment-to-moment feelings. Because the active management isn't based on analysis. It's based on emotion. It's based on the thermostat triggering and trying to bring the room back to a comfortable temperature. Think about the surfer for a moment. Not the beginner surfer who fights every wave, arms flailing, trying to force the board to go where they want, panicking at every shift in the water. Think about the experienced surfer who has been doing this for years. What does that surfer look like? They look relaxed, don't they? They look almost lazy until the moment the wave comes, and then something flickers on in them, and they move, but they move with the wave, not against it. They're not controlling the ocean. They gave up on controlling the ocean a long time ago. What they developed instead was an intimate understanding of how the ocean behaves, the patience to wait for the right wave, and the commitment to trust the movement they chose without second-guessing it in the middle of the ride. Trading is exactly that. The market is the ocean. You don't control it, you read it, you prepare for it. You choose your moments, and then you ride what you chose without fighting it, without renegotiating your decision mid-wave, without jumping off because the wave doesn't look exactly like you expected it to. The professionals who consistently win in this business are not more certain than you. They are more comfortable being uncertain. That is not the same thing, and the difference matters enormously. Certainty is something your ego wants. It feels like safety. It feels like intelligence. I know where this is going. I'm sure about this one. Every time a trader says something like that to themselves, a small alarm should go off. Because certainty in a probability-based environment is always a delusion. It might be a delusion that ends up being right on a particular trade. But if you start trading from certainty rather than from probability, you will eventually be wrong in a way that costs you more than the wins ever gave you. Because the certainty makes you confident, and the confidence makes you size up, and the sizing up means that when the inevitable loss comes, the loss that probability guaranteed was coming, eventually it lands hard. Comfort with uncertainty is the opposite of certainty. It's not, I don't know, and therefore I'm scared. It's, I don't know, and therefore I am properly humble about my position size, properly committed to my stop, and properly at peace with whatever outcome the market produces. That's a completely different psychological state. And it is, I would argue, one of the most sophisticated mental states a human being can achieve, not just in trading, but in life. To act decisively on incomplete information, with appropriate stakes, without needing to know how it ends. That is mastery, and it is learnable, but it has to be learned. It does not come naturally to anyone. I want to talk to you about something that doesn't come up enough in trading conversations. It's about identity, about who you think you are when you sit down at that screen. Because I've noticed something over the years, a pattern in the people who struggle most and the people who eventually break through, and it comes down to this. When you lose a trade, what do you say to yourself? Not what do you write in your journal. What do you actually say in your head in that moment? For a lot of traders, and I want you to be honest with yourself here, the internal narrative sounds something like this. I'm an idiot. I always do this. I'll never figure this out. I'm not cut out for this. Notice what's happening in those statements. They're not about the trade. They're about you. They're identity statements. They're the mind taking a single event, one trade, in one session, in one day, out of thousands of potential trading days in a career, and using it to draw permanent conclusions about who you are as a person. This is what I call the identity trap. And it is one of the most insidious and invisible wounds in early trading because it happens quietly and it happens fast and it happens every single day until eventually the psychological burden becomes so heavy that trading starts to feel like something you dread rather than something you're building. Here is the truth I want you to hold. Your worth was never in the trade. The trade was never about you. The market has no opinion about you. A loss is not evidence of your inadequacy. It is a data point. It is one spin of a wheel that you know, over time, lands in your favor, more often than not. That's it. That's all it is. But when your identity is tangled up with your P&L, you can't see it that way. You can only feel it as confirmation or disconfirmation of something you already believed about yourself. And that dynamic, that psychological loop, will drive your decisions in ways you cannot even see from inside it. What I want to offer you instead is the concept of the trader identity, not a mask, not a persona, not a performance, a differentiated professional self. The part of you that trades is not the part of you that feels your worth, loves your family, worries about the future. The part of you that trades is a craftsman, a probabilist, someone who reads information, makes calibrated decisions, manages risk, and then observes outcomes without attaching personal meaning to them. That self is not cold. It's not robotic. It is actually extraordinarily present because it doesn't need the trade to validate anything. It can just watch it, learn from it, and move to the next one. The gap between I had a losing trade and I am a losing trader seems small in words. In psychology, it is enormous. One of them is a fact about today. The other is a story about forever. Only one of them is true. And your ability to stay in the first one, to observe what happened without collapsing it into a judgment about who you are, that is the foundation of everything. That is what allows you to keep showing up with clarity, session after session, regardless of what the last session looked like. Now, I want to get into something that I think is the deepest truth in this entire conversation, because we've talked about the thermostat, we've talked about the two traders, we've talked about control and uncertainty and identity, but there's something underneath all of that, a principle that, when it finally lands in a trader's mind, actually changes how they feel at a cellular level. And it's this: losses are not losses if you're thinking in probabilities. Let me unpack that slowly, because I know how it sounds. It sounds like I'm asking you to be okay with losing money. That's not what I'm saying. Let me be very precise. Take a coin, a special coin weighted so that 60% of the time it lands on heads. You know this. You've tested it. The data is clear. You're going to flip this coin 100 times, and every time it lands on heads, you win $10. Every time it lands on tails, you lose $8. Over 100 flips, the math says you should profit significantly. Your edge is clear. Your edge is real. Now you start flipping. and the first 5 flips all come up tails. You've lost $40. What does your mind do with that? If your mind is operating in probability space, the way a seasoned trader's mind operates, it says, this is within the expected distribution. My edge is intact. Continue. If your mind is operating in single event space, the way most new traders' minds operate, it says, this coin doesn't work. Something is wrong. I need to stop, reassess, or change my approach. And here's the thing. The second response feels more intelligent. It feels like critical thinking. It feels like you're protecting yourself by questioning the system. But in the context of a proven edge, it is not intelligent at all. It is the nervous system hijacking the decision-making process and substituting emotional reasoning for statistical reasoning. And if you stop flipping that coin every time you get 5 tails in a row, you will never realize the profits that your edge was designed to deliver. You will just keep stopping and starting, doubting and testing, always on the edge of profitability, but never getting there. Your trading edge is the coin. Every setup is a flip, and some flips will lose. In fact, a meaningful percentage of flips will lose. That is a mathematical certainty baked into the very definition of having a 60% edge rather than a 100% edge. And those losses are not a problem. They are not a mistake. They are the cost of doing business. They are the price you pay for the 60% that wins. And the mind that understands this, really understands it in its bones, stops experiencing losses as failures. It starts experiencing them as scheduled payments, expected events, part of the design. This is not a trivial reframe. This is the entire psychological architecture of a profitable trader. When you feel a loss as failure, you are essentially saying, my edge should produce wins 100% of the time, and anything less than that is unacceptable. That belief, even when it's not conscious, even when it's just a felt sense of wrongness after a losing trade, that belief will drive you to interfere with your system, modify it prematurely, second-guess it constantly, and ultimately discard a working strategy before it has enough trades to demonstrate its value. Your nervous system was wired for survival, and survival meant treating every negative event as a potential crisis. A rustling in the bushes wasn't a data point in a probability distribution. It was either a predator or it wasn't, and being wrong about which one it was had permanent consequences. So the brain learned to respond to individual negative events with urgency, with threat activation, with a demand for immediate action to restore safety. The market is not a predator. A losing trade is not a rustling bush. But your nervous system doesn't know that yet. It needs to be taught. And the teaching happens through accumulated experience with deliberate awareness, not just experiencing the losses, but sitting with them consciously, labeling them correctly as statistical events, and building a new associative pathway between loss and expected part of the process rather than loss and threat. Act now. This takes time. I want to be honest with you about that. I am not going to tell you that you can read this script or watch this video and then sit down tomorrow with a brand new nervous system. That's not how any of this works. What I can tell you is that every single trade you take with this awareness active, every time you feel the loss and consciously, deliberately say to yourself, this is an expected event within my edge. You are doing the work. You are one tiny thread at a time, rewiring the association. And at some point, and I've watched this happen with enough people to know that it does happen, the new wiring becomes stronger than the old wiring. The losses start to land differently, the urgency fades, the neutral curiosity begins. And trading starts to feel, for the first time, like the craft it actually is, rather than the threat it always felt like. So what do you actually do? How do you take everything I've just said and turn it into something actionable today? Because I know that's where you are right now. You've been nodding along, something has been landing, maybe a few things have made you feel genuinely seen for the first time in a while, and now you want to know what to do with it. And I want to give you that. Not 10 things, not a complicated system, 3 things. Simple, concrete, immediately actionable. The first one is the pre-trade state check. Before you enter any trade from this day forward, I want you to pause for 30 seconds, just 30 seconds, and ask yourself one question. Not, is this a good setup? You've already done that analysis. The question is, what am I feeling right now, and is this feeling about the trade or about something else? Is there a tension in my chest that's about recovering what I lost yesterday? Is there an excitement that's about proving something to myself? Is there an impatience that's about feeling like I've been waiting too long and I need to be in something? If the answer to any of those is yes, if you notice that the emotional charge around this trade has a source outside of the trade itself, do not enter. Close the platform. Walk away. Come back in an hour or tomorrow or whenever the charge is cleared. This is the single most money-saving habit I can give you, and it costs you nothing. It takes 30 seconds. It requires no new knowledge, no new system, no new tool. All it requires is the willingness to be honest with yourself for half a minute before you click a button. And the number of bad trades it will prevent, the revenge trades, the boredom trades, the fear of missing out trades, is staggering. Because the impulse to take those trades doesn't announce itself as, this is a bad trade driven by emotion. It announces itself as a perfectly reasonable rationale. The setup looks good. The market is moving. I've been patient all day. Your mind will construct a logical case for exactly the trade it wants to take for emotional reasons. The pre-trade state check cuts through the logic and asks, but why do you want this, right now, in this moment? And that question is harder to fool. The second practice is what I call the sample size journal. And I want to be careful here because I know a lot of traders journal already, but I want you to change what you're journaling. Stop journaling what the market did. Start journaling what you did. Specifically, I want you to review not individual trades, but batches of 20 trades. After every 20 trades you've taken, sit down and ask yourself, how many of those did I exit before my target without a technical reason for doing so? How many did I move my stop loss in a way that wasn't in my plan? How many did I take when the setup was borderline because I was impatient? How many did I skip because I was afraid after a losing streak? Those numbers tell you more about your psychology than any trade outcome ever could. And they give you something specific to work on. Not, I need to be more disciplined, which is vague and unactionable. Something like, in the last 20 trades, I exited early on 7 of them, and in 6 of those 7 cases, the trade went on to hit my original target. That's information. That's the kind of clarity that allows you to make a specific behavioral change rather than a vague, aspirational one. The market is just the backdrop. You are the variable. And the sample size journal is the tool that brings you face to face with yourself as data rather than as a story. The third practice is the belief audit. And this one is the most important and the most uncomfortable. I want you to sit quietly, not while you're trading, not while the market is open, and ask yourself one question, one single question. Here it is. Do I actually believe that losses are a necessary and expected part of my edge? Or do I just say, I believe that? Because there is a gap, and I want you to feel this. There is a gap between things we understand intellectually and things we believe experientially. You can understand that losses are part of trading the way you understand that the Earth goes around the Sunday. Intellectually, it's settled, but you've never felt the Earth moving. You've never had a visceral experience of the orbital mechanics. You just know it as a fact. And for many traders, losses are expected lives in that same category known as a fact, unfelt as a truth. And that gap between the known fact and the felt truth is precisely where the sabotage lives. The belief audit doesn't close that gap through willpower. It closes it through experience. Every time you take a loss and you practice labeling it correctly, this was an expected event within my edge, nothing more, nothing less. You are adding one small drop of real experiential data to the bucket. And over time, the bucket fills. The felt truth starts to match the intellectual fact, And when it does, when your body stops treating losses as threats and starts treating them as information, something extraordinary happens. Your execution becomes consistent in a way it has never been before, because the interference stops. The thermostat gets reset. The temperature of uncertainty starts to feel not dangerous, but normal. Just the ambient temperature of the room you've chosen to work in. That's what I want for you. That's what this entire conversation has been pointing at. Not a new strategy, not a new indicator, a new relationship with the reality of what trading actually is. A probabilistic craft played out in an uncertain environment by a human mind that was built for a different world, learning slowly and deliberately to make peace with the one it's actually in. Let me bring this home. You came to trading because you believed something was possible. Maybe you couldn't articulate exactly what it was: financial freedom, independence, the quiet satisfaction of being your own boss, the intellectual challenge of reading markets, but something in you said, this is worth trying. And the early phase tested that belief in ways you probably didn't anticipate. Not just the financial testing, the psychological testing. The testing of your patience, your self-image, your tolerance for ambiguity, your relationship with failure. And maybe there probably were moments where you wondered if you had the thing it takes, if you were built for this, if it works for other people, but just somehow not for you. I want to speak directly to that moment, to that version of you that sits with that question. And what I want to say is this: you are not behind. The struggle you're experiencing is not evidence that this isn't for you. It is evidence that you are a human being with a normally wired nervous system attempting one of the most psychologically demanding disciplines that exists. The struggle is the appropriate response to the difficulty of the task. It would be strange if you weren't struggling. It would mean you hadn't taken it seriously enough to feel the real weight of what you're trying to do. The traders who make it through, the ones who build something real and consistent, they are not different from you in intelligence or in talent or in some innate trading gene that you either have or you don't. They are different in one way. They were willing to look inward when everything around them was pointing outward. When the losses came, instead of only looking for a better entry, they also looked at what the losses were doing to them. When the fear came, they didn't just push through it, they got curious about it. They asked, why is this fear here? What is it protecting me from? And is what it's protecting me from actually dangerous, or is it just unfamiliar? That inward look, that willingness to treat yourself as something worth understanding rather than just forcing into compliance, that is the work. It is unglamorous work. It won't trend on social media. It won't show up on a flashy dashboard. Nobody's going to give you a thumbs up for the 10 minutes you spent this morning honestly examining why you moved your stop loss yesterday. But it is the work that produces the trader who is still here in 5 years, still profitable, still growing, while the traders who only looked outward have long since given up and moved on. You came in today thinking, I'm struggling because I need better tools. I hope you leave knowing something different, something more precise, something that actually has the power to change things. You're struggling because your mind is doing exactly what it was built to do, and trading requires it to do something it was never designed for. The gap between those two things is real, and it is closable. And closing it is the most important work you will ever do in this profession. You are not a failed trader. Hear that. You are not a failed trader. You are an unprepared mind meeting a probabilistic world, perhaps for the very first time, and feeling the full friction of that encounter. That friction is real. It's supposed to be real. It means you're engaged with something that matters. The preparation that closes that friction is possible. The mind is teachable at any age, at any stage, after any number of losing streaks. I have seen it happen too many times to believe otherwise. And the version of you that trades with clarity and equanimity and confidence that is grounded in something real, that version of you already exists. You are not becoming a different person. You are becoming a more accurate version of who you already are. You're just clearing away the noise, the fear, the misunderstanding about what this is and what it asks of you. That work begins now, not when you find the right system, not when you have a bigger account, not when the market conditions change. Now, with the awareness you have today, with the trades you're going to take tomorrow, with the 30-second pause before each entry and the honest review at the end of each week, with the willingness to sit quietly and ask yourself if you actually believe what you say you believe about losses. That's where it begins, right there. If something in this video landed for you, if there was a moment where you thought, nobody has ever described it exactly like that, but that is precisely what's happening to me, then leave the word edge in the comments below. Just that one word. I read them. I want to know you're out there. I want to know that this kind of conversation is reaching the people it's meant to reach, because that's why it exists. Not to sell you anything, not to convince you that I have all the answers, but to offer you a mirror that might reflect something truer than the one you've been looking at. If this helped you today, if something shifted, even slightly, even just in the way you're thinking about tomorrow's session like this video, not for the algorithm, as a signal to yourself, a small commitment that says, I'm taking the inside work as seriously as the outside work. I'm treating my mind as part of my trading system. I'm not just going to keep changing strategies. I'm going to look at the person running the strategy. And subscribe if you want more of this. More conversations that go beneath the chart and into the mind that reads it. More of the uncomfortable, unglamorous, life-changing work of becoming the trader your strategy deserves. The market will be there tomorrow, and so will you. Trade accordingly.